You are listening to the Maple Footy Podcast. This is the unofficial football podcast of the North. I'm your host, Sam Little. Find me at official Sam Little on Instagram. There's nothing left to say except for sit back, enjoy, and welcome to the show.
Hello, yes, welcome back to the Maple Footy Podcast, the unofficial football podcast of the North, and it's good to be back, good to be covering the Canadian boys again. These are the reasons why this podcast even exists, so it's always good when we get to cover our Canadian boys, show them some love, and hope that they win. And in this case, they did win, so that's always good. Makes it a little bit more fun to get to talk about them and dive into the game a little bit. But before we do dive into the game in typical Maple Footy tradition as of late, let's have the Maple start. This one's going to be a bit shorter, and because most of the Canadian boys and Canadian football that we would typically talk about are with the national team right now, but still some nice things happened in the last week-ish, so let me tell you about it. First and foremost, shout out to Samuel Piet and Maxime Crépeau for becoming brand ambassadors, I believe is the official title, that they will be going under with the Montreal Roses, or Roses de Montreal. And yeah, just it's good to see a lot of the boys are really trying to help back the NSL, which will be Canada's pro league for the women's side of things. So it's just nice to see two very big and well-respected names in Canadian football backing the project, and hopefully more guys end up hopping on board various teams throughout the league. And I think that would really be, that'd be very good for the league. About a week ago, as of recording this, the CPL final took place, and the viewership numbers are in for CBC. The game drew over 600,000 viewers just on CBC. Football and One Soccer, they don't release viewership numbers, so we don't know how many total views they got, but over 500,000 people tuning into a CPL final. We kind of love to hear that. It does show, I think, that there is a little bit of an appetite for the CPL, so hopefully, maybe some of those 600,000 that maybe perchance don't always watch the CPL, maybe, just maybe, that game sold them on getting a One Soccer subscription and watching the CPL next season, maybe supporting their own local team or anything like that. And I think that that's very good. Speaking of CPL, of course, he's not Canadian, but he is a very well-respected player in the CPL. Ollie Bassett of Atletico Ottawa has announced that he is leaving the club after a 3-year stint. He was the 2022 Players Player, I believe, and the 2022 Player of the Year. So, obviously, very good player, well-respected, and it didn't say where he was going, but wish him all the best. I think he's been a very good player for the league, and especially for Atletico Ottawa. And sticking with the CPL, Emil Gazdov of Pacific is attracting a lot of attention. The Golden Glove winner and U21 nominee for the CPL. He is getting attraction from apparently a lot of European clubs. The report I had read didn't name drop any, but they did say that the 3 Canadian clubs in the Premier League, in the MLS, are looking at him. So we'll have to wait and see. It does seem like a move is very much on the horizon, especially when you kind of look at the goalkeeping for, say, TFC. Sean Johnston, a great goalkeeper, but is kind of, he's getting up there in years, right? And Gazdov is only 21, so who knows, maybe they could sign him and then loan him back out for a season or two until Sean Johnson decides to potentially either leave or hang up the gloves or whatever, Just, I could see it feasibly happening relatively soon. You know what I mean? And lastly, there will be a Canada January camp for MLS, CPL, MLS Academy, and MLS Next Gen Pros. So very good of Jesse Marsh to kind of implement this. Once again, kind of getting the rust off of a lot of the boys at that time, because for some of them, the playoffs will have been done for 2-3 months by the time January comes, depending on when their team was knocked out, like the TFC boys, like their season was done in October, so for them to now get kind of a training camp in January, get to kind of get up to match fitness, match sharpness, I think it's very good. Same with some CPL boys. Maybe it's a good chance for them to maybe just showcase to Jesse Marsh, and same with obviously the next gen pros and MLS Academy boys. I think it's a good thing. It'd be nice to see some representation from especially the CPL. I think there are some CPL players that could definitely, maybe if given a chance, impress Jesse Marsh, but we'll have to wait and see. I think it's a very good idea to have this camp. But that kind of wraps up a very quick Maple start. So because we're going to get right into the game, of course, you kind of know how this one works. If you've listened to my Canadian coverage for the Maple Footy podcast, I'm going to start off with pros, cons, and then move into player by player and just give my thoughts on everything. So let's get into it. So, of course, we did beat Suriname. We traveled to Suriname for the first leg of this tie. The second leg will be Tuesday at BMO Field, and hoping that it's a very good, raucous crowd for a big Toronto night. You kind of love when Toronto or Vancouver or Montreal, whoever gets to host the international break, you always love seeing how passionate the Canadian supporters can be. I will be there. I'm very excited about it. But let's kind of move into some pros. So obviously a hard-fought win, I would say, 1-0. I think a lot of people kind of thought, and this means no disrespect to Suriname, just that I think that a lot of people thought that this was going to be potentially a blowout of sorts. And it wasn't that. It was kind of the typical CONCACAF away day affair for Canada, where it was a bit chippy, a little bit cagey, very, very stop-start, a lot of wasted time. But Canada still ends up grinding out the win, and I think it's a big one to take back to BMO Field because I think it will be a different game at BMO Field. I think the being at home, being on proper grass, being on home turf, I think will do the Canadian boys a world of good. I think with all the hype behind them at the moment, they're going to want to show up and show out for the fans. So I think going in with a 1-0 win isn't the worst thing in the world. Obviously, it is still a win, first and foremost. And to just leaving there with that, I know it's not 3 points, but leaving there with the 3 points per se, and then coming back to Canada after a pretty cagey affair, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. I know that a lot of people probably expected maybe a bit more, but I think we might, if things kind of go to plan, I think we might get that in the next leg. And of course, with a big win, it does continue Canada's quest for gold come 2025, as the winner of this will go into the Final Four for the Nations League, of course, and will automatically get into the Gold Cup next year. I believe if they also get to the Final Four of this, I think that's what they said on commentary. I could be wrong. I could be just making that up. Who knows? But yeah, no, firstly, talking about the Nations League, of course, we lost last time in the final in 2023 to the U.S. 2-0. So this time out, I hope that the boys will be hungry to go back and kind of right that wrong. I think we're long past due a trophy for this. I would say I'm comfortable in saying Canada's golden generation. I can't really think of another one that would be considered that. But yeah, no, I would say a trophy on the way to 2026 is, I think, a must. Honestly, I think we, in my opinion, are the best team in CONCACAF, and I think that we need to get the gold to kind of prove that. So Nations League next year, and like I said, you automatically get into the Gold Cup if you get to the Final Four of the Nations League, the competition that we won back in 2000 and haven't won a trophy since. So another reason to want to win the Gold Cup, and of course this competition, the Nations League. So two big competitions coming up next year, and hoping that we get 2 of 2 trophies, but definitely I think we need to get 1. I really, really do, and I really hope we do, just because, like I said, we, in my opinion, are the best team in CONCACAF at the moment, and I think it would do the world of good for the boys on the way to 2026 in Qatar. And speaking of the World Cup and the Gold Cup of recent times has kind of been a time where Canada's top players kind of take a break a little bit. I know a rambunctious schedule, so they are definitely entitled to breaks and everything. But come next summer's Gold Cup, if we are there, which I would say it's a massive disappointment if we're not, but if we are there, I would say that shouldn't fly this time around. We need as much time with this group as we can before the 2026 World Cup. With being the host nation, it's not like we're going to be going through a qualifying campaign for these guys to be around each other all the time. We need to have these guys around each other as much as we can. So bringing them all to the Gold Cup, I think, is kind of a must. That would be both Nations League if we obviously progress to that Final Four. And then, of course, the Gold Cup if we qualify. I think we have to bring our best players, the ones that we think will be at the 2026 Gold Cup, just because, like I said, that time is going to be extremely valuable come that World Cup. So that's just my thoughts on that. I know that's not really talking about the game and the positives, but I didn't know where else to put this, so we're kind of chucking it in here. Another massive positive is Tajon Buchanan is back. I know he's been back for Inter, but has yet to play any minutes. That is a very tough team to kind of crack into. They have one of the best squads in the world, I would say. So very tough for him to break in there, but I'm very, very happy that he does get in here. He only gets about 10 minutes, which I'm not going to complain about, just because first game back after a pretty lengthy layoff. It's just good to have Tajon back. He is one of our star players. He's one of our difference makers, and hopefully this kind of leads to him getting some more time with Inter, because I think he needs to be playing regularly, because sitting on the bench doesn't do you any good, especially for a player of Tajon's quality. He deserves to be playing, whether club or internationally. So obviously hope that both club and country don't just throw him in, put him in for 90 minutes over the next, month of just straight 90s. You got to ease him in after an injury. But yeah, I do really hope that he starts racking up the minutes on both fronts, club and country. Another little positive is I liked what Jesse Marsch had said before the game. He did an interview with Stephen Caldwell and Kevin Kilbane, and they were talking about difference makers for Canada. See, look at that little transition. Difference maker Tajon Buchanan going into difference makers for Canada. Where else do you get that other than the Maple Footy podcast? But he was speaking about difference makers, and they were kind of listing off all the boys that play in Europe. And Jesse Marsch stuck up for the MLS boys like Ali Ahmed, Maxime Crepeau, and the TFC boys that come up, Osorio and Larea, and anybody else in MLS that I'm 100% missing off the top of my head. But he stuck up for them and basically said, hey man, don't be a European snob. And I think that Canada kind of needs to echo that sentiment. Guys, let's not just be, they're not playing in Europe. They don't gotta, they're not that good. No. These MLS is a quality league, and our boys in the MLS are doing the bits right now, if we're being honest. So we kind of got to back the MLS and, of course, with that being said, the CPL. And just let these boys flourish wherever they can flourish. If a European move comes, that's phenomenal. And I think that's great. And if a European move doesn't come and they're still lighting up in the MLS, that's also great. I don't think it needs to be this, well, if they're not playing over in Europe, then what's the point, So it's just nice to hear Jesse Marsch kind of say, hey, don't be a European snob. MLS and what's going on in North America is quality as well. And lastly, I'll probably get more into this when I talk about the subs, but Jesse Marsch's kind of quick substitutions within 15 minutes of the second half, he realized it wasn't working. Canada was losing control of the game, and he made changes very quickly, and I think that's good. That shows that he's willing to kind of pull guys off. I know one of the guys that was pulled off was Ishmael Kone at the time, who probably was never going to go the full 90, But I do still think it's a positive because some managers wait until the 85th minute when it has been working for 40 minutes of the second half, and then, they leave with nothing. Instead, Jesse Marsch makes changes, and inevitably those changes the game. So I think he deserves credit there. I think that's something that Jesse Marsch has done very well with the national team. He knows when to make the changes, and he makes them pretty well. This is a good few games now where it feels like he's made the right subs and the right changes. So props to Jesse Marsch. Moving into a couple of cons, I think it's kind of rinse and repeat of ones that I've said before, so I'm not going to spend too much time on them. But one, set pieces. I think we're getting killed on our set pieces. We are our own worst enemy. We don't have a proper, I feel like, set piece taker. I've kind of said I don't mind Eustáquio as a set piece taker, but this game was not his game for the set pieces. I will say that much. I do like Choinière, but he's not an out and out 100% starter all the time, so you can't really rely on Choinière to be the set piece taker if he's not always going to be on. Do you know what I mean? So we need to figure that out because, as I've said in previous podcasts about our boys, to be a top team, you have to punish on set pieces because those can be difference makers. And if we're not doing that, we could be missing out on massive chances, massive opportunities. So I think that really needs to sharpen up. And my other con, I would say, would be wasted chances. Once again, I know I've said this many times before, but we have such attacking quality that we need to be scoring more than we are, I think. It's not an indictment. I mean, I guess it kind of is an indictment on our attacking players, but because our attacking players are extremely talented, like obviously Jonathan David, Kyle Larin, Theo Bair, Tani Oluwaseyi, those are kind of our four strikers at the moment. And then, you bring in Ali Ahmed, Jacob Schaffelberg. I know Liam Miller's hurt, but typically he'd be there. Junior Hoilett's back in the fold. Tajon Buchanan's back in the fold. And whoever else you want to list off. We have great attacking talent. We need to be leaving these games with more. I do know this is kind of a typical CONCACAF away day. So I would say, as I kind of said at the start of the episode, going back to BMO Field, I think could be a different story. And I do think that if we don't leave BMO Field with a good couple goals, I think we need to have maybe a few more thoughts on wasted opportunities, just because we're too talented to not be getting more. Because I think, especially in that first half, we deserved a little bit more than going into halftime at 0-0, and then of course the game ends 1-0. So it's just one of those things where it's like the talent is 100% there. Like, it is. I don't think we can debate that, but we need to be capitalizing on that talent. And at the moment, it doesn't feel like we are, given our goal output. Oh man, cons. I don't like the cons. I like to just talk positively about our boys. But I'm sure, there's probably other cons, but screw it. We're only looking positive today. So yeah, let's move into the lineup and kind of do player by player and all that jazz. You know how it works. So in goal was Dane St. Clair. And hats off to Jesse Marsch. He has said in the past that the goalkeeping position is one that's picked off of form. And hey, I've been a massive Crépeau fan. I think he was outstanding for us at the Gold Cup. But Dane St. Clair is in unreal form right now for Minnesota United in the MLS playoffs. And I was very happy to see him start. And as I've said multiple times on the podcast, what a great headache it is to go, man, do we start our great goalkeeper Max Crépeau, or do we start our great goalkeeper in Dane St. Clair? What a headache to have. But with that being said, Dane St. Clair didn't have hardly anything to do. So I would love to have talked about him a little bit more. But yeah, he made like one save from a corner, I think, like just off the top of my head. And he looked good on the ball because they used him as like a passing outlet. But yeah, he was never really troubled on the day. So I'm very sorry, Dane St. Clair. I think you're having a great MLS playoff run right now, and you had a great season. So, there's that. But yeah, just very quiet afternoon for the goalkeeper. But I mean, I guess that's a good thing. And then moving into our defense, a little bit different of a look compared to the last time out, but still a quality defense nonetheless. We'll start with our boy Alistair Johnston. Congratulations, by the way, 50th cap for him. And I'm sure that there will be, knocking on wood, many more to come for Canada's right back and Celtic's number 10. You know what I mean? Just because, 4 goals, 3 assists for Celtic in this season. So playing like a number 10 at the moment. But yeah, no, I mean, pretty typical Alistair Johnston performance. Looked as solid as ever. I mean, was never really looked in much trouble against Suriname. I mean, a couple times he had to shut down an attack here and there. But I actually thought he was more productive up the field. He really liked that overlapping run with Ali Ahmed. I think the two of them linked up really well together on the day. But yeah, I think he really offered himself as a great outlet, put in a good few nice crosses into the box, was really showing off that new number 10 style he's adopted. Just really getting up there, kind of, I hate this term in football, but inverting, because he was inverting really well. He would do an overlap or an inside run. He would kind of be in the box, outside the box. He was kind of just cropping up everywhere and then still doing his defensive due diligence. Once again, not a whole ton troubled him on the day defensively, but I think attacking-wise, I think he was a great outlet and was probably robbed of a couple more assists that he could have added onto his tally for the season. Looking to the left, Richie Laryea stepped in for Alphonso Davies. I honestly thought that this was the day that Sam Adekubi was going to get that shout under Jesse Marsh, but alas, it wasn't meant to be. I mean, I'll never complain with seeing Richie Laryea play. I also just love Sam Adekubi. But Richie Laryea, I think, had a very vintage Richie Laryea game. Take a shot every time I say that about a Richie Laryea performance. But within 2 minutes was already drawing fouls, and within 3 was already in the thick of any heated arguments on the pitch. I mean, how can you not love this guy? He's just so passionate, wears his heart on his sleeve, and I mean, I think it's a reason why TFC fans and Canada fans love him, because he's so entertaining, so into it, so passionate. You kind of love it. And kind of much like Alistair Johnston, Richie Laryea didn't have a ton to do defensively on the day, but was a lot more productive up the field, especially in the first half, whereas I think the same would go for Alistair Johnston. Both of them were more productive up the field in the first half than they were in the second. But in that first half, I think he linked up well with Jacob Schaffelberg, much like Johnston and Ali Ahmed. But Richie Laryea, a good few balls in behind for Jacob Schaffelberg to run onto, and we all know how much Jacob Schaffelberg thrives when he's running onto that ball and just getting in behind defense. But yeah, I think he was really, Richie Laryea was really troubling that Suriname midfield and defense. He's just such a wild card. Do you know what I mean? He's able to carry the ball. He's able to kind of distribute the ball. You kind of don't know what he's gonna do. He's got that unpredictable factor, and I mean that as a compliment. He's got that unpredictable factor. Really, really kind of keeps you guessing, keeps you honest, and like I said, linked up really well with Jacob Schaffelberg on the day, I thought, and kind of same with Alistair Johnston. Not a whole ton to say about him defensively. He was good when he had to be, and wasn't really troubled all that much. Center back positions, we'll start with Joel Waterman. He was the big talking point coming into this because we didn't know who would be replacing Derek Cornelius as Bombito's center back partner. Potentially could have been Miller, but they went with Waterman. And he looked a little bit shaky within the first couple minutes, but then really settled down. I thought he had a very good game, a very untroubled game, much like most of all of our back line, but still a good game, was calm and composed when he had to be. And couple times his passes went astray and or he was kind of picked off. Like I said early on in the game, I found he kind of wasn't as calm on the ball, got picked off, lost a couple battles here and there, but it wasn't like I'm like, oh man, Joel Waterman, never play for Canada again. No. It was still I thought it was a good performance. He grew into the game, stepped in well for Derek Cornelius, and Joel Waterman is kind of used to playing in the center of a 3 center back. three center back trio, I guess. So for him to kind of just be playing right side of a duo is a little bit different for him, but I do think he adapted really well. Like I said, a little bit shaky at the start, but really settled in. I thought he had a good performance, and I think he's done enough to warrant a start going into the next game. And beside him, Moise Bombito. I mean, I think he won almost all of his duels. I saw that stat. I believe he was like 100% in nearly everything. Passing was like 84%. Now, I don't delve into stats all that much here on Maple Footy because sometimes I do think that watching the game is a lot better. But yeah, it just goes to show that Moise Bombito is kind of really developing into just a great center back. I mean, Nice loves him, Canada loves him, Jesse Marsh adores him. And I mean, much like his defensive partners, he did not have a whole ton to do defensively. But when he did, I think he stepped up real well. Shows the maturity that Bombito has garnered just since coming in under Marsh. You know, back in June, we would have been like, oh, Moise Bombito's getting the start here. And now it's like, oh, yeah, of course Moise Bombito is probably like one of the first names on the team sheet, right? Like, obviously. So it just kind of goes to show you how quickly Jesse Marsh has really helped develop a good few of these young Canadian talents. And Moise Bombito is no exception. He's been immense for Canada and is already one of the top players for the nation at the moment and is doing great at Nice. So quiet afternoon for him, but definitely not one that he should hang his head in shame about. It was a very good performance, definitely. Moving into our midfield, and we'll start with the wide players. Ali Ahmed, once again, I thought he had a good game. I really do. I think he had a very good game. I think probably should have earned I believe it would have been his first Canadian goal. He had a very good opportunity that I think he should have turned in. I think that he knows it too, judging by his reaction at the time. But other than that, I mean, as I kind of mentioned with Alistair Johnson, linked up very well with him. Both of them complement each other really well. They found each other very nicely. And Ali Ahmed putting some nice balls into the box was causing the Suriname defense a lot of problems. He's a handful. He's a tricky player and not afraid to be direct and not afraid to kind of lay off. He's kind of intelligent in that way. I find there are times where he lays off a little bit and kind of is more able to analyze a situation. Maybe he wants to whip a ball and maybe he just wants to pass the ball off, or he'll be extremely direct, take the ball, take on a couple guys, and then what comes of that, you know? So I do really enjoy watching him play. He's a great joy to watch, I find. And that was no different today, especially in that first half where I think Canada was a lot better in that first half than we were in the second half. And Ali Ahmed was, I think, very productive in that first half, was trying his best to create chances, was looking very dangerous. Like I said, probably could have had a goal himself, but wasn't meant to be. Maybe next game, maybe. I mean, I wouldn't complain if I saw a good few goals at BMO Field. But yeah, no, overall, I think it was a good performance from him. And I mean, he's quickly showing why Jesse Marsh trusted him in these last couple of games with the absence of Tajon Buchanan, like the Canada-Mexico friendly, and then, of course, the Panama friendly. I think it just shows that Jesse Marsh has that trust in Ali Ahmed. He's able to step up and is doing very well at the moment. Move across and basically copy and paste what I said for Ali Ahmed for Jacob Schaffelberg, because I thought it was a good performance from Jacob Schaffelberg, especially in that first half. Kind of like I said, Richie Larea would set Schaffelberg off on a nice little run, and Schaffelberg caused problems. I mean, it's what Schaffelberg does, right? He's that chaotic element in any team he's playing in, and once again, I do mean that as a compliment. He's a chaotic element. He's just so quick on the ball. It's very hard to catch him, and he's quite tricky on the ball, and his crosses in on the day I thought were very good, and I think maybe on a different day, maybe we're leaving the pitch and Jacob Schaffelberg's got an assist or two to his name, because I think he was getting himself into very dangerous positions, and was really putting in some nice chances that just were not capitalized on. But I can't say that that's his. He can't cross it and then score it himself, right? I think overall he had a good game, especially like I said in that first half, and then coming into the next leg, I wouldn't be surprised to see him and Ali Ahmed get the starts on those wings again, because I think that they're both very productive and didn't do enough to really get dropped unless Jesse Marsch wants to rotate. In all fairness, I mean, we'll have to wait and see. Moving into the center of the park, it was great to see Ishmael Kone back. It was definitely a quieter night for him. You could tell he was a little bit rusty. Not that he was bad by any means, but he wasn't as eager to carry the ball. Which is a great trait of his, I think. And he was just kind of more subdued, I would say. It was a subdued performance for Kone. Not bad, just I think a very quiet performance from him. And I think that's okay given the fact that this was his first start for Canada since the Copa America. And he's been in and out of Marseille with a couple of injuries this season. So it's just good to see him back. And hopefully that's the end of his injury bug this season. Really hope so, because he's too good of a player to not be consistently playing for Canada and for Marseille. But yeah, I don't have a whole ton to say on Ishmael Kone. I think that he had a quietly good game, but definitely not the style of play that we've come to know and love from him. His passing was good. He was a good outlet for Stefan Eustáquio and hit those around him like Jacob Schaffelberg, Jonathan David when he dropped deep, or Ali Ahmed, whoever. I think he was a good outlet. Just, yeah, like I said, just not that explosive Ishmael Kone performance that we've come to know. And like I said, not the worst thing in the world. We don't want to be seeing him, out there running rings and then all of a sudden, oh shoot, he's picked up another injury. Do you know what I mean? It's easy to just kind of settle in and kind of get his feel back, get his aura back. You know what I mean? So that's kind of the end of my Ishmael Kone wrap up. But yeah, just very kind of like Tej, very nice to see Ishmael Kone back wearing the red of Canada, and just, hoping that that's the end of his injury woes for this season, because like I said, he's too good to be sitting on the sidelines. Moving into Stefan Eustáquio, I thought very quiet, but very good. I thought he controlled the tempo of this game very well when he kind of like any Canada performance. When Stefan Eustáquio kind of loses the tempo of the game, Canada kind of loses the tempo of the game. You can see how important he is to this squad, because in that first half when Canada was really playing real well, I thought Stefan Eustáquio was at the heart of it. A lot of his distribution was just so on point on the day. He like long balls, short passes, just offering himself up as a little outlet. I thought he was very good on the day for the most part. And then when he kind of lost grip in the first 15, 20 minutes of the second half, that's when Canada kind of started losing grip. Stefan Eustáquio he's just a crucial player for us. And when he's on, we're on. And I thought for the most part on the day, he was definitely on. Like I said, some great passes. I thought he was really exploiting the Suriname midfield and their defense on a number of occasions on the night. You could tell he was really trying to find Jonathan David and Tani Oluwaseyi up the pitch. I think he really wanted to exploit the gaps in that Suriname defense, and he did a good few times, and just nothing sadly came to it. But regardless, I think he did his part, and yeah, I thought it was a very good performance, and I thought he would probably be at least he'd be a contender for my man of the match, because I thought he was very good, and it probably isn't even a top 10 Stefan Eustáquio performance for the national team. So I think that just goes to show his quality for the national team. And I mean, wearing the captain's armband, being our vice captain, no Alphonso Davies, of course. So it is just, it's just good to see. We love seeing our boys ball, and I do think that Stefan Eustáquio did ball on the day. So let's move up top to our strikers. We'll first start with the boy, Jonathan David. I mean, are we comfortable in saying the best player in CONCACAF at this very moment? I can't really see a challenger to him. Maybe Pulisic, Davies, of course. But, Yeah, I think Jonathan David on form right now is probably the best in CONCACAF, and definitely showed it today. Had a couple half chances, but nothing clear cut, no amazing opportunities for him on the day. He was more so playing provider, and Jesse Marsh in the interview that I referred to earlier with Caldwell and Kilbam, he basically said he doesn't want to play Jonathan David as a lone striker because Jonathan David is such an intelligent player that playing him as a lone striker and just sticking him up at the box is just wasting his talent. And I would agree. You see how much Jonathan David, I mean, how many times was he dropping back and was in deep into Canada's half, collecting the ball and trying to control the game from back there, almost playing like a number 10. And I think that that's kind of what suits him best for Canada, kind of a hybrid 10 striker almost, because he's obviously got the finish on him. We know that. We know that. Canada's top goal scorer of all time on the men's side, of course. Never disrespect Christine St. Clair, the GOAT. But yeah, on the men's side, our top goal scorer of all time. And there's a reason for that because he's a great striker. But I think he's so much more than just a striker because the way, like I said, the way he's dropping back, turning provider, and even like just in the buildup of stuff, just very good, very complete player, just so intelligent too, knows where to be, knows what the boys around him kind of want, knows where to play the ball. It truly, to me, reminds me of watching Harry Kane. And I say that having disliked Harry Kane for years being a Tottenham player, but Jonathan David's quality he's just so good. He's so good right now. I mean, he's been good, but I've said it multiple times. It's the best we've seen Jonathan David play, I think. And he does nab a very big assist. I think it's a great goal overall. An amazing crossfield ball by Eustáquio. David takes it down beautifully, and his ball almost like around the Suriname defenders, finding Junior Hoilett, and of course Hoilett scoring. It just kind of sums up those moments of quality for Canada. When it clicks, it just clicks, and it's great to watch. Jonathan David doesn't get in a goal, but he leaves with an assist. He's now got, I wrote it down, give me a second, 46 direct goal contributions in 58 games. So 30 goals, obviously, 16 assists in 58 games. That's absurd. Like, that's crazy. That's wild. Okay, like that's amazing. Like that's an insane output. Like, seriously. So Jonathan David right now is playing out of his skin, and I'm very excited to see where he may land once his Lille contract is up this summer, because last report I read, Inter Milan and Juventus were the two teams that were leading the race for him, but recently a report also just broke that Bayern Munich is also heavily watching him. So we'll have to wait and see where he ends up. I mean, getting him on a free will be absolutely massive for whatever team. So definitely we will keep an eye on that. But yeah, I thought it was a very good game from Jonathan David once again for Canada. His partner, Tani Oluwaseyi. Now, I've been seeing a lot of Tanny discourse online, and I'm not going to stand for it, all right? I'm not going to stand for it. He's a quality player, okay? He is, to me, he is a hold-up striker. He's a complimentary striker. I don't think he's a striker that you're going to hang your hat on to get X amount of goals. He will pop up with goals, absolutely. Hasn't happened for Canada just yet, but I think that time is coming. And oh my gosh, you can't get any closer than Tani Oluwaseyi he did against Suriname. Hits the one post, the ball trickles along the line, hits the other post and comes out. Like, come on. Like, he's doing everything right, just missing that finishing touch. I think I'm hesitant to make this comparison, but he reminds me almost like a Darwin Nunez in the way that he plays. Darwin Nunez does have a better goal output, of course, but in the way that he plays, the way that he kind of opens up a defense with his runs, kind of Darwin Nunez, Timo Werner hybrid, which will make sense in a minute. The way he makes runs and opens up defense for those around him is immense. because Jonathan David gets space. Ali Ahmed, Jacob Schaffelberg was getting space because the defenders were so sucked in to Tanny's runs and what he was doing that you had guys around him getting the space. The only problem is when the ball would fall to Tanny, he wouldn't convert, and I think that that's what he needs to work on. He needs to work on those chances that he converts. He's a very good player. I really do believe that he's a very good player. He just needs to get that finishing touch to him. I mean, 8 goals, 5 assists in the MLS this season. Obviously, he can score. He can turn provider. He just needs to start doing it now in the red of Canada, because with guys like Kyle Larin, obviously Jonathan David, Theo Bair, and whoever else is on the come up, these opportunities may not always come to him. So I think he needs to take advantage of these opportunities. And like I said, very unlucky to not get a goal here, because he definitely deserved it. But there was a few other occasions where he probably maybe could have reacted a bit quicker or gotten a shot off. And I think he just needs to find the back of the net, and maybe those goals will start coming in for him. I really do think that his first international goal, much like some of these boys like Ali Ahmed, Theo Bair, I think their first international goals are coming. They're quality players. They just got to get there. And Tanny Oluwaseyi, like I said, he's doing everything right around him. He's really helping those players around him, because like I said, he's really sucking in a lot of pressure. He just needs to then, when it's his time to take the shot, convert, he just needs to do it. So my watch still says Tanny time. I'm not giving up on him. He's class. Just let's be patient with him. I do think that his time is definitely coming. So let's move into the substitutions. Speaking of Tanny, he was replacing the 61st for Kyle Larin, and as well, Osorio came on for Kone. Kyle Larin, I thought, was a very quiet night. He kind of took up that Tanny Oluwaseyi role, kind of was that hold-up play guy, was kind of trying to suck in the Suriname defense and midfield, kind of trying to absorb that pressure. Didn't work as well, I found, with Kyle Larin on the pitch. I'm not sure if that's because maybe the Suriname defense kind of adapted, but yeah, just because Tanny in the first half was doing it a lot, and then into the second half, before he was substituted, wasn't as much, and then Kyle Larin came on, and kind of same thing, just wasn't really having that success that was in the first half. So maybe it was a tactic change from Suriname. Because they just weren't finding as much joy kind of being that striker to kind of absorb the pressure, make those runs, and kind of open up the game for those around them. Moving into Jonathan Osorio, I do really like Jonathan Osorio and Eustáquio together. I mean, they've now played together internationally for it's got to be 4 or 5 years at this point. So they have that chemistry. They complement each other really well. Osorio's just a veteran guy that you can either start bringing off the bench. You're getting a solid 7, 8 out of 10 performance from him. So, and I mean, I love Jonathan Osorio. Everybody knows it. I have literally 3 Canada jerseys. All of them have Osorio on the back. I have a TFC jersey that I've had, oh my gosh, I think since like 2018. It's an old one. But yeah, no, I love the way that Osorio plays. He's so good operating those pockets of space, and probably unlucky, kind of like a couple guys to leave here without a goal. He got a great opportunity, but it was a great block by one of the Suriname defenders. So he's just one of those guys that can really step in really well, I find, and he does the things that maybe you might not notice if you don't watch. If you're not watching him. But yeah, just operates well in those pockets, was a great outlet for Eustáquio. Our tide kind of started to turn once we brought on Osorio for Kone in that second half. I thought Kone had a good first half, but then into the second half, when we kind of started losing control, we bring on Jonathan Osorio, bring off Ishmael Kone. I think we kind of regained some of that control a little bit. And I think that is in part to Jonathan Osorio kind of coming on the fresh legs, Kone obviously coming off of that injury. So I think it was a good call from Jesse Marsh, I think, to bring on. I know Larin maybe didn't have the effect that we wanted, but I do think it was good to bring on Kyle Larin and Jonathan Osorio. We needed to make the changes, and then we did. 17 minutes later, Tajon Buchanan came onto the field for the first time since the Copa America, and I mean, what obviously didn't have a whole ton to do. But this was more so about just getting him on the pitch, getting his kind of shake off a little bit of rust. I think he will probably still be rusty for the next little bit, having missed 5 months. Yeah, 5 months. Having missed that 5 months, now coming back in, I think it's just good to see him back in. But the big guy that came in was Junior Hoilett at the same time. And in either the last Canada podcast I did or two before, it was either last international break or the one before that, I had said it's a shame that we're not bringing Junior Hoilett because I do think he still has stuff to offer for the team. Now, I don't think he is here if Liam Miller is healthy, but this just shows that Junior Hoilett's got that quality and has that maturity to be able to just come in from the cold. Really hasn't been with the boys since just before Copa, when he had to pull out of our Copa squad because of injury. Shout out injuries, love them. But yeah, no, he hasn't been with them since that would have been June or May, right before the Copas. So it's just good that he comes back in, and sometimes you need your veteran boys to step up, and that's what Junior Hoilett does. A great goal from him, I would say, and it is, I think, a reason why Hoilett needs to be in this setup as long as he can be, because he is just that player. He may not be as explosive as he used to be in his younger days, but he still has that footballing IQ. He knows where to be. He knows what to do. He still has all the tricks in the world in his bag. He is just such a good player, especially for Canada. I think that he needs to be in around this setup. I do know that left wing spot is extremely clogged with Schaffelberg and Liam Miller, and of course Junior Hoilett, and then I'm sure you could probably list off a good few other guys, but Junior Hoilett needs to be in this setup. He really, really does. He's got the quality. He shows it here. He bails us out, gets us the win, and it just shows that the veteran guys can do it if they get given the opportunity. That's all I'm saying. I think so. Yeah, overall, good to see Junior Hoilett. One, good to see him back in with Canada because I love Hoilett, and two, good to see him score. Definitely a big moment for Canada, and it helps us going into the second leg. And then the final sub came in the 85th minute. Mathieu Chouanière came in for Stefan Eustáquio. I think it was just to bring on a fresh pair of legs, kind of help see out the game. Obviously, can't really do a whole ton in 5 minutes, but just nice to see Mathieu Chouanière get another cap. I think he's definitely earned the right to be in and amongst the mix for getting into the starting 11. I think he stepped in greatly for Ishmael Kone when he was out in the last couple of games. So Mathieu Chouanière, of course, kind of losing that spot in the starting 11, but I do think he's just in that bubble of, very much ready to be into the starting 11 or one of the guys off the bench, as he was here today. But of course, it doesn't get more than 5 minutes, so I don't have a whole ton to say about him. But just nice to see him get another cap. I think it's just good to see. But yeah, so with that being said, Canada 1-0 over Suriname, big win. Gives us the advantage going into the next leg. Like I said, I do think that the next leg will be a little bit different. I think that the BMO crowd will kind of really help lift the boys up, and playing on home turf is an advantage, especially in CONCACAF. Away days in CONCACAF we know are famously difficult, so good to get the win here. And I do think we need a statement victory in the next leg, because I just think it is what we need. We performed well, especially in the first half against Suriname. And the second half, I think we kind of died out, but had our moments and capitalized on it. And then coming into this game, this next leg, I do think that we need to see a more convincing scoreline and a more convincing performance. And I do think that we probably will get that, just because that's kind of the way CONCACAF seems to go. Away days are tricky, but then you come back home and it's usually a bit more of a happy experience. So hopefully that is the case. Like I've said, I'm very excited. I will get to be attending. So very excited about that. It will be a lot of fun. I will, of course, cover that game. And yeah, follow me everywhere. if you're going to the game, I hope you have a great time. If you're watching the game from home, I hope you have a great time. And yeah, follow me everywhere. You know the drill. It's in the intro and the outro. You know my handles, official Sam Little, all that jazz. And yeah, so that's it. Thanks for listening. I do appreciate it. And yeah, until next time, cheers, everyone.
And that was your Maple Footy podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Check my socials for any and all future updates at official Sam Little on Instagram, where I am most active. And until next time, live, laugh, little.